take about another minute to let folks sign on.
Aquí está y todo. Está ahí volumen y todo. Tiene los de estos como que si fuera una lab. Está bien todo. Sí.
Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Toch. I am Director of Future Ed and Education Policy Center at Georgetown University. I'm excited to moderate this afternoon's conversation about a new direction in gifted education. Few policies in public education have been as contentious as how schools identify and educate their most academically able students. Some seek to dismantle gifted and talented programs, exam schools, and other advanced offerings, arguing that they promote racial and economic segregation. Others defend current programs that exclude millions of capable students. But a new model of advanced education is emerging in some states and school districts, aiming to balance academic rigor and equity. We're fortunate to have 4 experts with us to help explore this new third way in advanced learning. Homero Chavez is the Early Education Program Director in Arizona's Gadsden Elementary School District number 32. Jonathan Plucker is a professor of education at Johns Hopkins University, a leading researcher on advanced education, and a past president of the National Association of Gifted Children. Peg Tyre is vice president of the EFG Accelerator, a Future Ed Senior Fellow, and author of the recent Future Ed report, Excellence with Equity, Rethinking Gifted Education. And Jennifer Yonkers is the Senior Director of Accelerated Learning for the New York City Public Schools. The panel is going to share their perspectives on advanced education during the first part of the hour, and then we'll turn to audience questions. Please write your questions in the Q&A box in the Zoom navigation, not the chat, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. We'll record the session and post it on the Future Ed website in the coming days. So Peg, can you start us off by a picture of the advanced education landscape in public education today? Who is advanced education serving and how well, and who isn't it serving?
Thank you, Tom, and welcome to all the webinar people tuning in. So the broad picture is that what we're seeing is that access to advanced learning opportunities reflect many of the systemic biases baked into our society. For example, students of color, English language learners, students with disabilities, and those from low-income families have long been denied opportunities that are typically delivered through what is known as gifted and talented programs. The data is stark. The wealthiest 20% of families are 6 times more likely to get advanced opportunities than high-performing students from the poorest 20%. Black students are 66% less likely to be referred for advanced learning opportunities than their white counterparts, even after controlling for grades and scores. There's about 3 million children, public school children, who begin school each September 3 grade levels above their classmates, and they're likely to sit in class for the entire year, never learning anything new. At the same time, advocates for equity in education point to gifted and talented programs and see a sort of backdoor segregation. And in many ways, they're not wrong. 40 years ago, following court-ordered desegregation mandates, many white families, especially in the South, used G&T, as it's called, gifted and talented programs, as a way to create elite schools within a school using taxpayer funds. Even now, gifted and talented programs are nearly all white and Asian. And for that reason, equity-minded people have been pushing to disband these programs in places like Cambridge, Mass, San Francisco Unified, in the Chicago public school system. And that in turn has created pushback from parents who want their children to receive acceleration or advanced instruction. And that pushback, as we saw in San Francisco, has been largely been successful. Still, a few districts are looking at these programs through a more modern lens and operating from a bedrock belief that talent is everywhere and creating programs that build pipelines of excellence from every community and not just wealthy ones.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Jonathan, can you help us sort of understand the opportunities that are available to students in advanced learning? What are the various types of advanced programs that are out there, and which ones do research suggest are the most effective?
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thanks for having me here today to talk about this important topic and this excellent report that Peg and Future Ed put together. This is a really interesting question. It seems so basic, but when I hear critics say things like, all the studies say that gifted education doesn't work, I always think, what are you even talking about? That's like saying education doesn't work. Well, we would never let that go unchallenged, right? In general, when we're talking about advanced education, we're talking about acceleration, essentially letting students move through the curriculum faster, and preferably without any limits, and then also enrichment. So going deeper, acceleration would be sort of farther, faster. Enrichment, sort of broader, maybe deeper. And now it doesn't feel sufficient to just boil it down to those two things. I think the last classification out of the University of Iowa was that there's over 21 forms of acceleration. It could be something radical like grade skipping or graduating from high school early, going to college early, or it could be a fifth grader taking sixth grade math, right? Like there are lots of different ways to do it here. But that's really what it boils down to, is just sort of, enrichment or acceleration. That's pretty much the set of strategies that we're thinking about.
Yeah, great. Can you build on what Peg suggested or shared regarding the sort of evolution of today's debate? What other sort of aspects of the history of advanced learning would you highlight? You've studied this as much as anybody.
Yeah, I really like how Peg sort of framed it, and I think one thing to keep in mind, this is why I'm optimistic about advanced education in this country, other countries, is that whenever I hear critics say, "Oh, gifted education is so horrible," I say, "Okay, well, describe what you're talking about," and they end up describing whatever they saw when they were in elementary school. So I get lots of 70s and 80s and early 90s descriptions of gifted ed, and some of those didn't work very well. Some of them were sort of de facto segregation. Many really were just sort of playtime, and there wasn't a lot of serious learning going on. Over the past 20 years, though, we've seen a huge turnaround and just a huge leap in quality in our thinking about, like, what do we do for the student who needs more, colloquially, like a student who needs faster instruction, a student who can learn at a faster rate. The student who needs a lot more depth in something like math or history or art or almost any content area, and so we've seen it move in very positive directions. Just what we know about trying to identify who needs more, we just do it so differently, and we're going to get into this, but I think, but at the same time, what Peg talked about is really important, is we can't deny the fact that a lot of people's criticisms, historical criticisms, are absolutely 100% valid. A lot of bad things were happening. Now, Do they still happen? Of course, bad things happen everywhere. Are we doing a much better job of being inclusive and really helping all students move forward as fast as they can? I think we are. So it's not the best history, but I think we are moving in very, very positive directions right now.
Yeah, thanks. Amara, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here. So when people talk about the term gifted, as Jonathan has suggested, they mean different things, but there's a tendency to believe that giftedness represents kids with exceptional innate talents or abilities. What is your sense of that term? And maybe you can share your perspective on the word gifted by way of telling us a little bit about the program, the advanced opportunities that you have provided the students in your school district.
Yes, good afternoon. We're a K through 8 school district. We run like 5,000 kids, and the early college program recruits kids, like around 500 kids during the year. And we use basically local norms to do that. We're not a gifted program. What we do is we use the state school results and the local norms, anything that we can get a hold of so that we can identify the kids. Once we identify the high proficiency kids, we place them in our programs, the early college program. And from there, we offer a series of things. We offer a high-level mathematics, algebra. We even have an ACT prep class with this. And then we also offer kids the opportunity to enroll at Arizona Western College or community college. And the kids start enrolling in that college by 6th grade. We have 6th, 7th, and 8th grades are attending community college and up to pre-calculus. We've been doing this probably since 2007. And we've probably helped around 3,500 kids with algebra classes, English 100, English 101 courses. The kids that are part of the program, some kids join some gifted kids join our program because we have the programs that they are looking for. So we don't exclude anyone. And basically, we look at the high proficiency, highly motivated kids, and we bring them in, and that's what we do with the kids. We basically, teach them high-level mathematics. We have a good group of teachers that know their material. We have 3 engineers that became teachers. We have a former Gadsden School District kid that went to MIT. He's out working with us. And at one time, we sent a bunch of kids to the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth program. We were probably one that sent the most kids in the entire United States to that program, which was 200 at one time from one district. And since then, we've been doing really good. We encourage, kids to participate. Those who don't want to, that's fine with us. But we leave the door open for whoever wants to be challenged. I feel that that's what we need to do in schools in America. We need to really avail the kids the opportunity to challenge themselves and to by front-loading programs that the kids can take advantage of. That's what we do up there. We sit in the border. We're like about 700, 800 feet from the border. Our schools are, we're the second poorest city in Arizona. Like Peg mentioned it, she's been there in our district. And, but we're doing great things. There's a lot of kids that we have 3 kids that have gone to MIT. Recently, Raul Hernandez Sosa got selected to attend either Harvard, Caltech, Princeton, Yale, and MIT, and then he selected MIT. We have we have Jose Monjardin, who's been into our program through 5th grade. He just got his degree in biomedical engineering from Yale. We have a lot of kids that have been really successful out of that small town. And I think it's the way we identify the kids, the way that we lay down the programs and challenge the kids. So we're alive and well up in San Luis, Arizona.
So would these kids have gone on to do the great things they're doing absent your program? Without your program?
I don't think so. I think that the kids really wouldn't stand a chance because of the fact that you need to challenge these kids. You need to provide the programs in order for them to understand the system. We have 5th graders right now. We have 5th graders that tackle the ACT in 5th, and then by the time they leave us at the 8th grade, they end up taking the ACT 4 times. What that does for them is they practice the ACT and they get better at it. And every year they get higher scores on the ACT. And that's one of the tests that basically the universities like for kids to take in order to apply for those universities. So by the time the kids end up leaving the 8th grade, a lot of kids end up taking pre-calculus and Calc 1. And we have a 14-year-old kid that got an A degree, Associate of Arts degree, before she got her driver's license. Basically, and of those, we have many, many examples, like 30 or 40 kids that are going that route, be finishing their Associate of Arts degree before high school. So definitely.
I want to ask just one, thank you. I want to ask you just one more very brief question before we move on. But how much talent, given what you've seen in your district, how much talent in public schools in this country goes untapped?
A lot of talent. And I think that happens more in underrepresented communities where they don't have the necessary economic means to be able to bring in people that are able to provide these types of programs. Yeah. And especially in marginalized communities, rural schools, for the most part. That's my belief.
Yeah. Thank you.
What I like about Homero's program is that it puts other districts to shame. If you think there's no kids who are capable of accelerated learning in your district, you should go to Gadsden, because these are kids of migrant farm workers and he's sending them to MIT. And the reason they're getting there is he's creating a ladder of learning to help them move forward. And it's not right for everyone, but the kids who it's right for, they're on rocket fuel. It's amazing. So I just want to echo what Homero's saying. Talent is everywhere.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, we've done studies where we've been able to show using national databases that like every classroom has kids who are already working above grade level. Yet if you ask their teachers and principals, the teachers and principals don't realize that, even with the kids right in front of them. And part of it's a training issue, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I would say of our most talented students, maybe at best, half of them are getting advanced opportunities. It's probably less than that. It's probably closer to 25%, which at this point in this country just kind of stuns me.
And parents will vote with their feet. I mean, we've seen this in New York, that we've had a lot of families leaving the New York City school system. And David Banks tells me that when he did a listening tour, many of the parents said that they didn't feel like the schools offered their children opportunities for advanced learning. And I don't think these are the precious parents who just think their little kids are, their kids are, more special than anyone. I think that it's kind of the responsibility of parents, if you think your kid has a spark, to meet that spark with opportunity. Yeah. That's what being a parent is.
Thanks. Jennifer, you've worked in advanced education programs in New York City for a long time. Mm-hmm. Give us your sense of the term giftedness. How should we be thinking about it? Homero gave us, a broad sort of definition of kids who are ready for advanced learning. How do you see this that playing out in New York City? In particular, how should we think about the term gifted? Should we even be using the term gifted?
Thanks, Tom. So for us in New York City, we actually shifted away from the term gifted or giftedness several years ago. And the reason we did that is we know all brains have immense potential for learning at high capacity, achieving at high capacity. And so for us, it was really about this idea of gifted behaviors. How do we develop those behaviors? What are the contexts we could create for children to develop those behaviors? And what we started to do under our G&T expansion, which I know Peg just mentioned, we listened to a lot of families across New York City. Families want G&T programs, but also opportunities for acceleration in various ways, since we know there's not just one way to do this. And so for us, in terms of how we define these gifted behaviors, that's really shifted our identification process, where we're looking more at local norms, a more holistic process that focuses on strengths and interests and capacity to learn. And as we think about our professional learning for educators, we've also worked with teachers and leaders to say, what does this look like if we're creating context that cultivate these behaviors?
Yeah, thanks. When you talk about local norms, what are you thinking there? How do you define that term?
So that is ever changing. I think we adjust all the time based on the response we get from our leaders, from our families. We do use what we call a checklist for gifted behaviors. That's something that we're using internally. We've used for a number of years and have piloted. But there, we really want to make sure that teachers are trained. What are you looking for? How are we identifying these behaviors? And that's something that we look at across a student's academic career as well.
What are some of those features? And by the way, we're moving away from using the term gifted, so we're gonna call it advanced learning and not gifted, per your instructions.
Thank you. So we really look at different academic as well as non-academic indicators around student strengths and interests across different domains and disciplines. And so we teach teachers to look for certain things. One thing, and I don't quote me on this one. So one thing that is an indicator is if a child might be rushing through work or quickly completing an assignment, that might be something that I'm thinking about. Do they need more challenging work? And so it's also training teachers to look for this. And of course, there are biases associated with this type of assessment as well. And so we're working on what does the training look like there and how do we correlate with other pieces of data as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Jonathan, what are some of the, you've researched this thoroughly. What are some of the other sort of features of identifying students with advanced abilities that school districts in the sort of forefront of this sort of new generation of advanced learning are using? And Peg, you've written about these too, so
yeah, I definitely refer people to the report because it does a really it just does a very effective job of kind of highlighting these things actually in context. But I actually kind of want to talk about the gifted thing quick.
sure.
That's the fourth time that I've used the word, and it's made my skin crawl every time it's come out of my mouth. Like, I do not like using that word. Jen was being nice, but where you were heading, Jen, was like it is a relic of a different era when we thought about ability and human capability in different ways. We've moved beyond that in almost every field of study decades ago, and yet we're still labeling kids with the G word. We don't need it. It doesn't help us at all. Who's capable of advanced learning? What sort of advanced education and advanced services can we get to those students? There's no magic number. I get asked for the magic number by school boards all the time. Like, what percentage of our kids should be advanced? And I'm like, I don't know. How many can you get there, right? So the G words, let's just get rid of it. It's not helpful to us at all. Actual things to do. Because Jen mentioned local norms, let me actually start with that. I was going to kind of end with that, but it is so important. And the best example that I can give is that when your high school soccer team decides that they're going to get their players ready for the varsity season, right? And the coach looks at all the young women he has at his high school and says, okay, who are my players? If that coach, if he or she said, okay, I'm going to use national norms, I'm going to take the top 10% according to national standards. Essentially, who could make the Olympic team one day? Who could make the women's national team? Those are the only players I'm taking this year. Maybe I'll have one, maybe I'll have zero. That's how we're going to play this season. Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? The coach is probably going to say, who do I have that's at a state level? Like who is already playing at an all-state level? Who's like next down, but I can get them to that level with coaching, the right sort of peers. Who's not really there, but boy, I see some flashes of talent, right? The sorts of things that Jen Homero were talking about, like those sort of soft skills where you can see that spark in their eye. How can I get those players on this team, right? That's actually local norming. We do it in sports, arts, music, all the time in schools every single day. We almost never do it when we're talking about advanced academics. So just looking at where the talent is and where it could be in your community, in your school, in your classroom, we know makes a huge, huge difference in terms of how you find these students.
That's what Homero is doing, right? In Gadsden.
Absolutely. Homero's also doing a good job with things like universal screening, right? Like instead of waiting for that parent nomination, the teacher nomination, self-nomination, peer nominations, those are all interesting pathways. But if you have universal data that you can use to screen students, so every single student gets considered, regardless of what their skin color is, what language they speak at home, their parents' bank account, their zip code, all that gets ignored when you're looking at a universal screener. Most estimates are that, especially for low-income students, universal screening helps you find 2 to 3 times as many low-income students, not with the potential, but who are already performing at advanced levels that otherwise you're just missing. So things like universal screening, local norming. Homero talked earlier about front loading, which is kind of hard to describe to people sometimes, but he does a fantastic job of it. Is starting as early as you can. So like making sure that you're being rigorous with the curriculum and instruction with younger students, so that the first time that they get challenged with advanced instruction, it doesn't like stun them, right? So taking the ACT in 5th grade, so that by the time you take it the 3rd or 4th time in high school, this is not new to you. Like, you know the rules, you know how to play the game, you like being challenged. I mean, I could go on and on talking about strategies for hours, but it's just things like that both of my colleagues in the trenches here are doing every day, and that the report does a very good job of highlighting.
And multiple measures too, right? That's
absolutely. I should say, how you use data is almost always more important than what data you have. And so using multiple measures, using multiple data sources, but I've been in school districts, I may have actually taught in one, where the identification system to find these students who need more had all these great diverse indicators. But then the student had to had to be in the top 5 to 10% on every single one of them. And so I was in a 750 student elementary school, a very big school. And I was able to identify one advanced students because every student had to meet every single criteria. It needs to be much more flexible than that. And very, very few of us could excel on every indicator that is put in front of us. So yes, using multiple measures, but using them smartly and sort of strategically.
Fair enough. Thank you. So how do we respond to the critics who would abandon advanced learning in the name of equity? I'd love, as many of you who would like to take that on to respond. But Jen, the former mayor of New York, I think, was in that camp under some considerable pressure to eliminate advanced programming in the name of equity. Mayor Adams, Chancellor Banks, now currently have rejected that sort of point of view. Why and how has that played out sort of politically?
So in New York City, there was a longstanding scarcity model that existed for our G&T programs. And part of that was related to how we identified students before we moved our identification process. And so under Mayor Eric Adams and Chancellor David Banks, they really sought to eliminate that. Ultimately, the goal was that every school district in New York City would have not just one on-ramp to G&T programs, but two. And so we have our first on-ramp that happens in kindergarten, and that has traditionally existed in New York City for a number of years. However, not all of our districts had access to that on-ramp. So under the expansion, we made sure that every district had access to a kindergarten G&T class. And then the second on-ramp, which was a much larger expansion, we had started a grade 3 G&T pilot in 8 districts, and that was really linked to a lot of the research around later identification and how important it is to provide students with a lot of opportunities to rich instructional experiences. And so the mayor and the chancellor expanded that program to all 32 community school districts. And as they did that, it wasn't just about adding programs, it was also about improving the quality of the programs, and at the same time, leveraging those programs to help us increase access to accelerated learning for all children in New York City. So with all of our schools, with our new programs, about 60 or so, we support them with multi-year professional learning, resources, things of that nature. But we also took that as an opportunity to develop and test cutting edge resources that we could use to accelerate learning. And so ultimately, the expansion helped us achieve a lot of our equity goals because we ensured that there was programs available in every single neighborhood in New York City. We also made sure that we had a consistent instructional approach in our G&T classrooms, but at the same time, we're working to increase access to accelerated learning for all students.
That's super helpful. Amara, I'd love for you to respond to this question because many of the students in your community have traditionally been underserved nationally, many of the types of students in your community, not in your community per se. And so I'm curious to know how you respond to the critics who say, really, what we're trying to do is level the playing field for the students of the sorts that you serve, right? I'll throw in a question from someone in the audience, which is related. How do you reconcile the need to provide some students advanced learning without creating a two-tiered education system that's segregated by ability? That's essentially the equity argument. You're muted.
Getting rid of advanced programs is actually defeating the purpose of what we want to accomplish here with kids that are ready to tackle, the high level curriculum. And basically, it's it's like providing, it's like turning your back against the kids who are already there to be able to be challenged. I think that there's in every corner of a school in America, there's a lot of talent, and we need to challenge those kids. We need to continue, challenging the kids, and the more and we need to also, include a philosophy of more instead of less. So how are we going to be able to not do that if we get rid of advanced programs? Like, for example, how are we going to be able to impact our kids that are low income, low on food, low on gas, if we don't provide those advanced programs? They wouldn't stand a chance in America to live a better life or have a better quality of life. And I'm talking about kids, families that are farm workers. How are we going to turn our back against those families by not allowing those kids to go into advanced programs? Okay.
Peg, in your research, you also spent time in Montgomery County, a large suburban, exurban district north of DC, where 160,000 students attend school, and kids in 137 different elementary schools feed into 4 middle school advanced learning programs. How is this sort of equity debate playing out there, and what have you found to be, as part of that, the impact of expanding advanced programming in the rest of the middle schools in the district?
That's a good question. Montgomery County went through a lot trying to get it right. Ultimately, they settled on a formula that provided universal screening for all children, and children who were exceptional among their peers were invited into one of the magnet middle schools. If there was a large enough cohort of children in a particular school that they found had the capacity for advanced learning, they left them in their neighborhood schools, middle schools, and instead offered them enriched classes. So the kids who were isolated got to go to the magnet schools. The kids who had a cohort stayed in their neighborhood middle schools. And interestingly, at least to me, is that identifying kids as capable of advanced learning and leaving them in their local middle schools had a galvanizing effect on parents. They began pushing for learning opportunities in their regular classrooms, and they challenged the district. Now that I know my kid is capable of more, you've shown me, you've told me he's capable of more, how are you going to provide her with more? And the overall effect has been raising the level of sophistication of the curriculum overall. So in a sense, identifying these kids, galvanizing their parents, helping to create energy around advanced learning the tide has lifted all boats. And I saw that also true in the school that I visited in Brooklyn, the Landmark School. They have a very enriched curriculum there for the advanced kids who have capacity for advanced learning or identified as interested in advanced learning. And the energy around the curriculum, it's terrific. I mean, it's amazing to watch, but the energy around those classrooms has infused other classrooms. So in a place where you might not look for kids who are really lit up around school and lit up around learning, the advanced curriculum has put a lot of energy into kids achieving. It's very exciting to see.
Interesting.
Might I be able to build off of that? Because
Sure.
I think Brooklyn Landmark is one of the schools that I've been working with and we've been working with in the city. Yeah, it's amazing work. And so ultimately, I think this kind of addresses 2 of the questions that came up, one around AP courses as well as international baccalaureate, and why don't we just make those universally accessible? And so ultimately, I think the piece here is that there's multiple ways to do this, and we want to offer schools multiple approaches to do it. in terms of our work, specifically with our schools with new GNT programs, we've been talking about how do we use our curriculum to make that come alive? How do we support interdisciplinary instruction? How do we incorporate very effective project-based learning? And how do we use techniques like curriculum compacting to make more time for this instructional approach and differentiate instruction and tailor it for students? And so that's been some of the work we've been doing in New York City. And I think there's no one size fits all model, but in going into our schools and seeing the work that's happening, the kids are excited, the teachers are excited, and that excitement actually spreads beyond the GNT classrooms. And a lot of our leaders are interested in doing this now across the entire school, or we have superintendents at our districts that are piloting this work across an entire school, where it may look different if I'm in a GNT classroom or I'm in a self-contained special education classroom. However, students can get components of that work.
Yeah, I think behind that question from the person in the audience, it is a concern that many of us have, and it goes to Peg's reference and Jonathan's reference early on to what was well known back in the day as tracking, right? And there was a racist component to that. There was a classist component to that. How do we, sort of rethink the notion of tracking in today's environment, where, as Jonathan has suggested, our expectations are very different. They don't always get acted on, but our expectations for advanced learning are very different. How do we think about tracking today and those who are concerned about it?
I mean, the person who asked the question before about the concerns about a two-tier system, this is essentially the same question, right? Yeah. And when I saw that question pop in, my immediate thought was, why two tiers, right? Like, so if we do this the right way, we're going to have an infinite number of tiers. Like, there's not if you have 100, if you're dealing with 100 different students, we certainly have the capacity now to be able to design educational experiences that challenge them all appropriately in 100 different ways. We can do that. It doesn't have to be the same for everybody. And I think you see that in districts, some that Peg profiled, lots of others, where they are figuring out ways to really individualize so that you are providing these different paths without it being self-contained, gifted classrooms, which is a very old model that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Fair enough. Here's a question I wanted to ask you, Amaro, on behalf of someone in the audience. So they're wondering, and I'm sure many are, how do you train your teachers to teach advanced work on the one hand, and then also differentiate instruction on the other? Neither is easy.
The teachers that are in the early college program, we're very fortunate to have. We have like 5 former engineers. We have 2 biomedical engineers, 2 software engineers, and then we have a metallurgical engineer. And then on the other hand, we have a kid that came out of our program, a former student from the early college program that went to MIT. And he came back and is teaching for us at one of their junior high schools. All of these guys also teach as adjunct math professors at Arizona Western College. So basically, they know the content, and I know in other parts of the United States, that's something that it's a challenge for districts. But these guys know the subjects, they know the content, they love to teach high-level mathematics, and they have the background. So we're very, very fortunate that these guys, became teachers, but they bring in that expertise and that background
Yeah.
to the mix, basically.
Well, we should be thankful that they're willing to teach and committed to teaching in small rural communities like yours. I mean, that's a credit to them. Jennifer,
Tom, can I jump in here very quick and
please.
Like my grandiose vision, utopian, is that like every school in this country, public, private, whatever, has advanced services in it, just like we do for special education and lots of other things. The one thing holding us back is teacher training, administrator training in this area. They just have never been exposed to all that we've learned about strategies, the special needs of advanced students, etc. And so I am often asked, okay, you can like fix one thing. Where do you start? It would definitely be educator preparation. We tend to blame teachers and principals and superintendents for their attitudes in this space, but if you've never been exposed to all the work being done, how could they ever know about it? Right? Yeah. So I think this is a really important issue.
Great, Jennifer. So part of your job is working with teachers who didn't evolve as experts, weren't trained as experts in advanced instruction. You're retrofitting them in a sense. What's the key to doing that?
So for us, what we did under the G&T expansion, we added 60 new programs. And so we knew we had to train our teachers. And what does this mean? What does it look like? Ultimately, we knew that wasn't going to happen overnight. So we have a multi-year professional learning plan. Teachers come together as teams, and we also train leaders. So we ask leaders to be there for the professional learning as well. I want to say the biggest thing we start with are beliefs and mindsets about what students are capable of and how intelligence is grown. And then also we work with teachers around professional decision-making with the curricular materials they have. We integrate project-based learning, but we also tap into a lot of these methodologies that we know research shows accelerate learning. And so really arming teachers with this information and then supporting them in making those instructional decisions together. And developing that skill set. And so we're now in year 2 of that. We just ended year 2. And ultimately, the cohort does a lot of cross-city work where we share practices. We look at how this looks very different in the Bronx than in Queens, than in Manhattan. And we're okay with that. We want that to be really flexible and responsive to the communities that teachers are serving, that leaders are serving. And ultimately what we find is that even though we're asking them to do really hard work, the teachers are very excited to do it and to also share what students have been working on as well.
Thank you. Here's a question about funding. Does the panel think that every school will be able to fund accelerated and enriched learning? And it relates to the scarcity issue that a couple of you have mentioned. We spent a lot of time in this country fighting over scarce seats in a small number of advanced programs. While it's clear from what you've been saying and what the research suggests is that there are many, many more capable students who would benefit from advanced programming than there are advanced programs available to them. So what about the scarcity sort of mentality and the sort of funding dimension of that?
I mean, well, I suspect that the reason why we've always rationed advanced services is this 1950s and 1960s mindset that you're born gifted or you're not. We know that's not how human brains work necessarily anymore. There's, as everyone has said, there's many, many, many more students who should be in, but like school districts just hasn't been internalized. And I think that the scarcity problem is one of our biggest problems. If you're restricting supply, this severely, as almost every single district does, you are always going to have equity problems, period. That's just a statistical fact. You have to expand services. But here's the kicker that I don't get. It's the same number of kids that you're servicing, right? You're just thinking differently about how you're helping guide their education. It doesn't necessarily have to cost that much more, if more at all, over the medium to long term. It's just about thinking differently about it. And we're seeing this in states like North Carolina that are doing policy initiatives like automatic enrollment, where if a student performs at the highest level, say at the end of third grade in math, they are automatically placed in the highest level in fourth grade math. It just sounds like common sense. It has really increased the number of students in advanced math classes within North Carolina. It hasn't cost that much more, because it turns out there's a lot of those students who weren't getting the opportunity. So you could form extra classes moving forward. I'm not saying it's a wash, but I often get pushback from people who say, oh, we just don't have the millions of dollars to do this. To which I often say, then don't spend $1 million to do it. Just find creative ways to do it with the resources that you currently have. It doesn't have to cost more.
Yeah. Oh, so some people are going to ask, well, how much more does it cost? Omero, you're serving 500 students. It's a significant percentage of your community's population with advanced programming. How do you make it work in a community that lacks a tax base to put a lot of money into public schools?
You know, our kids take Arizona Western the college courses for credit, and we have a partnership with them where their credit, instead of paying $90 a credit, they pay $25 a credit. The only thing that they need to do is under 18 years of age. So a lot of our kids are taking advantage of the fact that they're being charged really like $25 a credit. So, you know, we worked out a deal with the college because of the fact that we don't have, parents don't have a lot of money around. So that's one of the ways that we ended up tackling the issue of money in that regard. For the ACT, we had 350 kids registered for the ACT. Right now it's at $68 to register for the ACT. That's how much it is. The district pays for that. The district understands the importance of these programs, and we have the backup from the school board. So they went ahead, they go ahead and they pay for the registrations for all these kids. It's a lot of money, but it's an investment, no? And they look at it as an investment, and they've been doing that for the past 4 years. It used to be that CTY at Johns Hopkins used to pay the majority of the money for kids to register for the ACT, but they're not doing that anymore. That's fine. The district took over that, and that's how we are paying that. Then for the after-school tutoring, the district also pays our teachers to stay after school and tutor. It's only about 6 or 7 teachers, and they get paid, you know, extra. So the district has budgeted for that, or, you know, maintenance and operations money. You know, they budget for that because they see the importance. You know what they see is that all the schools are getting good labels, and they're getting good scores because of the kids that are in the early college program. So they invest. If they see results, they're going to invest. And the more the kids that you get involved, the better it is for the parents, because the parents have the power to say, hey, we want this, we want to continue with these programs. You don't want, you know, to work with just a 3% of the kids. We want to work with a more, you know, we want to embrace that philosophy of more instead of less, or handful of kids. So basically, districts, you know, should embrace that philosophy, because then you have more power, then you have more programs that are advanced, and you can do a lot more with the kids. And then, of course, you're going to get better scores as a
Sure.
district.
So here's related question. Who pays for the 4 or 5 teachers that are working in your advanced program? The engineers, are they just on regular staff, and do they teach other students as well, or are they added onto your staff and to just work with these kids? And who
They're
pays for
part,
them?
the district pays for their full-time employees. They're there, they're working within the system. But what they do is they teach in the advanced, they teach all day long, they teach advanced mathematics. All the teachers, they teach during the school year, they teach the ACT prep classes during the day as part of the daily schedules. And then they also teach in the after-school program, which is about two hours or 3 hours after school. And then the same teachers that teach also teach at the community college. So the community college pays for that.
Oh,
For
so they're getting
their salary, yes.
for their salary for the work they do in the community college, not their salary for the work they do in your schools.
Yes. Mm.
Okay, great. So can we talk? We've only got a few minutes. I think we've covered a lot of the questions in the Q&A. Thank you, everyone, for sharing those. But I'd love to talk for just a minute about the politics of advanced programming. We've been talking around that a little bit, but Homero, maybe you can start us off just briefly, because we only have a couple minutes and love to get everybody's perspective on this. But you know, you're carving out a substantial program for a large number of students, 500. And how do the families? How were you able to you know, convince the school system to do that? Because politically that can be difficult when you're in effect favoring some number of students. And how did you respond to those families whose kids are not in the program?
You know, we have an open door. If the kids want to go in it, they can go in it. But the thing is that we identify high level kids. And let's say if a parent wants their kid to be challenged, I will not say no. But I will say, you know, these programs are for high kids, but if your kid wants to try, let him try. You know, that's how we do it. For the parents, for the most part, they love our program. We've been doing this since 2007. They know that this program works, and eventually they want their kids in the program. So politically, honestly, there's no politics in this. You know, it's already ingrained in the culture. And I think Peg knows, because she was there talking to some of the kids. It's ingrained in the system already.
Yeah.
And it would be wrong for somebody, an administrator, to say, hey, we don't want your program anymore. You know, you're going to have, you know, those 500 mothers and grandfathers and parents knocking at the administrator's door saying, hey, don't touch those programs, because those programs work.
Yeah.
So basically, that's why we want more instead of less. We want to make sure that we want advanced programs more than just to work with the 3% of the kids that fall in a normal curve. You know, the more the merrier, man.
That's helpful. Peg, you wrote at some length about the politics in Montgomery County. It was very fraught there, and I think it went to a certain extent to a large extent to the scarcity mentality that we've been talking about, a lot of competition for limited seats. But what proved to be both the pitfalls and the sort of solution to the politics with parents in Montgomery County?
Well, to be clear, what you had before with the old model is that parents opted their kids in. They had them tested privately to show that they were gifted. So the people who got into classrooms that accelerated learning were kids whose parents knew how to work the system or had the resources to work the system. And what's changed is with universal screening is that it begins early. There's several entry points, and rather than the kids being measured against some random cut score, it's locally normed, so like the top 5% of every child of every school gets scrutiny. And I think that it was not without its difficulties. And I think the most challenging part was communication with parents, because they had a scarcity mindset. They had been kind of jerked around by the district, telling them different things. And even now, the system is not as transparent as you might want it to be. These are, in many areas, some pretty high-powered people with paying close attention to how their children are educated. And I think communication can't really be, there can't be too much communication around this, because parents really want this information, and they really want to know what opportunities are available to their children and how to access that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Jennifer, we'll give you the last word. How has the community, the parent community in New York City responded to your efforts to expand access to advanced programming in the elementary schools in the city?
So for us, ultimately, it's not an either or approach, where we're having the scarcity model. We have programs or we don't. We really are looking at it as we wanted to expand programs. We wanted to make sure that the programs we have are high quality, teachers are trained, there's a consistent instructional approach. But at the same time, we're looking to increase opportunities for accelerated learning for all students. And we know that there's different ways that that can happen. And so ultimately, I will say, like, in this approach, that has really helped us navigate the political pieces. And we know that there's so many students that are capable of learning at high levels, achieving at high levels, that we also know that that's the right thing to do as well. So the programs have really helped us experiment with a lot of things, test out new models that we can then share more broadly across New York City.
Well, that's a great note and hopeful note to end on. I want to thank all of you, Jen, Peg, Homero, and Jonathan, for a really thoughtful conversation. Thank you to everybody who is watching for your thoughtful questions. As I said at the outset, we'll have a video of the webinar on Future Ed's website in the coming days, along with some resources from the panelists, including the Future Ed report. And we'll continue to work on what is a really important issue. Thank you all for participating. Take care.